Good day and welcome back to Elementary 72 Gaming. And finally, I am on to the last of the damage dealing weapons, the last of the two-handed big weapons, and that will be the Warhammer. Now, the Warhammer is a spectacular crowd control weapon. It does have its abilities that can be used on a single enemy. It does have abilities that are generally very devastating. But overall, this is one of the best skill trees for you to use to wipe out enemies. I'll go through this one here from the top, and it is also a part of what you would call the bruiser build. Now, I I do know on my last video with the fire staff I didn't talk about its usage positions for something like a tank. Obviously there are uses for it. If you're using it in conjunction with the tank, it is a good thing to do. As I said, most of its abilities were on the one side, which were usage for the healer primarily. It can be used for a tank, but it is a mage. It isn't a DPS secondary weapon. When you use it, you are a mage. A mage is a DPS. It's just a specialized DPS who uses magic. Okay, so let's get into this one here a lot sooner. Now, before I actually get into the actual build, I'd like to ask you all to please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. Subscribing to the channel doesn't really hurt you. You can subscribe and you cannot pay attention to my videos if you really don't like it. It just helps me out with getting out there to a few more people. Getting more opinions might improve my video quality because I do take a lot of suggestions from people. Now let's get into it with the first skill, Clear Out. A wide swing that knocks enemies back 4 meters and deals 115% weapon damage. Now it's just a 115% weapon damage. It's a 4 meter knockback. It is a good way for you to clear enemies off a healer or a tank. If you are a DPS and you need to save one of your team members, this is a good attack for you to use. It's also a good crowd control because you can keep forcing enemies to push in a single area. The next ability on this here is Power Cleaner. Hitting a target with the Clear Out grants Fortify, providing a 10% defense bonus for 4 seconds to all friendlies within 6 meters. So if you are using this next to a healer or next to a tank, this is going to help you big time. This is also a good one for you to use if you are in the center and trying to push the enemies towards the tank. By blasting them into the tank now has more enemies on them. You allow the other DPS to apply a lot more DPS in that area and wipe out a lot more enemies. You might also be the close range DPS because this is a close range assault class. Now obviously this ability isn't meant for the close range DPS. You will mess up the DPS if you do this next to the tank. Clean and refreshed. Clear out cooldown is reduced by 5% per enemy hit by the ability. So if you use this in a big crowd, say for example the tank's shield is somehow broken and you really need to get him out of there before he dies, you jump in there and you hit this clear out. And say for example he's in the worst type of situation, he's in a combat arena, because this is the first time that I'm actually going to mention them, but the combat arenas do have flood waves, and if you are flooded and you use the Clear Out to save your tank, you could really help him big time because you're also applying that Fortify to him. You're giving him a few seconds to recover his stamina. Once the stamina is back, he can pull up his shield. He had that 10% of Fortify to help him in that time when he was taking damage. You helped everybody else on the field as well. Swing away. Using Clear Out on targets grants haste, increasing movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds. Obviously this here is a follow-up ability. Using it is generally to give you a chance to escape or to give others a chance to escape, as I've explained it. As I said, you can use it in the mid to push enemies towards the tank. You can use it to pull enemies off aggro. There is also something else this here can be used for, and it is one of the good things about this particular tree. Now this tree is going very fast compared to most of my other trees because it's very self-explanatory and its usage is that simple. So let's get to the next one, Shockwave. Slam your Warhammer into the ground, causing a 3-meter radius earthquake that deals 80% weapon damage. Stuns to all impacted targets for 2 seconds. Taunt gem compatible if you have a carnelian gem equipped in your Warhammer. Now this is where it helps the tank again. If you are a tank with this ability, applying shockwave is going to apply this massive amount of taunt. You actually have a chance to pull enemies towards you, plus they are stunned for 2 seconds. Pairing this up with your standard shield flow will allow you to last a little bit longer in combat. Now let's add on to this here. Frailty. The trauma of the attack causes weaken, decreasing the damage dealt from target attacks by 10% for 10 seconds. Once again, it's another help to the tank. Using shockwave is something that a primary DPS will try and do quite a bit if you are using this in the primary fold. Doing this here on the enemies will hold them in place, allowing the tank some reprieve, allowing him a chance to recover some of his stamina. It will also give him a chance to put on a lot of damage, causing the auto taunt from him. You will have aggro on you for those few seconds, and the tank can obviously pull it off afterwards. Now obviously if the tank is using this, he's going to use it for an aggro buff. As I said, you can use any of the mage abilities to pull aggro without a carnelian gem, so it's just a massive DPS pull-in for the enemies. This is a massive pull-in for you as a tank, plus it's reducing damage. Expands the range of shockwave to 4 meteors. That's meteoric crater. So obviously expanding its radius is a good idea because you're expanding your stun. It also is going to make sure that your taunt is more effective across a larger distance. So we've completed the first 2 in this quite easily. It gets a little bit more complicated, you'll find out why. Path of Destiny. A powerful ground strike that erupts a linear shockwave of energy in front of player, deals 110% weapon damage to all targets in its path. Now, considering that this does a lot of damage, it is a good way for you to apply it, especially when the tank is doing a nice rally on enemies. Applying this at a medium distance is perfect for you. As I said, this here can be used at medium, and this can be used for pulling off aggro. If you are using this in the middle, you can use it to pull aggro. Remember, you are going to hold too much aggro, get to your tank needs to take aggro after that. Path of Destiny now staggers all targets in its path. So now it is now going to leave them staggered for a few seconds. Staggered means they're going to have that little dizziness effect applied to them. That means you can apply more damage on them. Crits are going to be easier on them for that short stagger. Last but not least, you have simulated reduction. Ability cooldown reduced by 5% for each enemy hit in the pathway of destiny. So if you have a nice group of enemies in front of you and you run the pathway through them, you are going to recover a lot of your cooldown. As you can see, the cooldown on this attack is 20 seconds, this attack is 13 seconds, and this attack is 18.4. These mesh in quite well with your tank's abilities. They don't mesh in quite well with your DPS abilities. DPS will use more of these abilities. I'll get to them in a second. And last but not least, we have Aftershock. Whenever a target is affected by a crowd control effect, they are slowed by 20% for 4 seconds. Now this here may not seem like a big deal, but with the knockback and a crowd control effect giving them 20% slow, that means you gain a little bit more time for the healing in the center, for the recovery of stamina. Outnumbered. Increased damage absorption by 10% if surrounded by 2 or more enemies within 3 meters. This is for your tank. By swapping quickly to the hammer, you still have the ability to absorb damage, and then you can shockwave or Path of Destiny them to improve your ability to deal damage or to reattach your taunt. Facilitated Expedition. After hitting a target with an active debuff, gain haste, increasing movement speed by 15% for 3 seconds. This is good for mid, it's not good really for any other position. Resurgence. After 2 light attacks and light attacks with the Warhammer, debuff duration on players are reduced by 25%. Cooldown every 5 seconds. So if you had 4 players with Warhammers in your team and you all applied 2 light hits, you're going to gain this 25% reduction on negative debuffs. That's poison, that's weaken, that's bleed. All of these are reduced by 2 seconds. It's a good thing for you. I don't know if this applies to a team or just to the individual. Oh, only on you. Sorry, I didn't read that properly. Acceleration, reduce Warhammer cooldown by 7% when using light attacks against targets with an active debuff. So if you've used your attacks on enemies and you light attack them, you're going to reduce your cooldowns. 7% is a massive cooldown. Remember, these last for 2 seconds. So in that 2 seconds, applying 2 hits, that's a 14% cooldown for you instantly. Reduce stamina consumption by 30% when blocking melee attacks. So this is a good one. It's meant for the block. It's meant to help you as a tank. Guarded sprint, reduce damage taken by 10% while sprinting. Okay, that is for moving around on the field. I used it myself. Deal 15% increased damage against targets affected by Warhammer debuffs. Okay, so if you have debuffed them with your Warhammer, so if you've just cleared them out, or if you've just shockwave them, or Path of Destiny them, you now gain 15% damage to apply to them. It's going to help you big time in the front line. Prevailing Spirit, regen 35% of damage dealt as health when using a crowd crush ability. Okay, so any one of these 3 abilities are going to give you 35% of the damage back as your health. So it's a healing ability. It's a good one for the tank. 35% of the weapon damage, especially when you're overwhelmed. If you knock this quickly on the shockwave, it may only be 80% weapon damage, but let's say that you're surrounded by 6 enemies. That's a big hit. 6 times 80 is 6 times 8 is 480%, and you gaining back approximately 35% of that damage. It's not a 10%, so it's over 100. Over 100 healing is quite a quick one. You can always pair that up with a Path of Destiny and a quick clear out. That's going to give you another bonus. So if you Path of Destiny them and then clear them out, you're looking at a nice solid 1000 to 1300 inside that range of healing. Sorry, no, I'm making a mistake again. 35% would be basically a third. So you're looking at a nice solid 3 to 400 healing applied instantly through damage dealt, plus you have some time to recover. Okay, so let's get on to Juggernaut. Now let me just do this here quickly before I get into it. Juggernaut is more important here for the DPS side of this class. Unlike the crowd control, which is good for tanks and is good for other positions on the field, clear out can be used even on your healer. A quick clear out to push enemies off you is going to help you big time. It's going to allow you a chance to get rid of any close range enemies. They are the biggest pain to you as a healer. The long distance enemies, you can still fight them. You can take them out while the healing is on cooldown. Okay, let's get to Juggernaut. Armor Breaker. Now this is an important one. A powerful swing that penetrates 30% of the target's armor and deals 140% weapon damage. Now this 35% of the target's armor, it means it's going to reduce 35% armor. Big thing for big enemies. If you have enemies with a defensive block, you're going to knock out a massive portion of their bar, so you can do more damage a lot sooner. So Armor Breaker will help you big time, plus it does a massive hit all at once. Indomitable, add grit to Armor Breaker, prevents you from being staggered by incoming attacks. So you won't be stunned or staggered during that assault. Lasting Trauma, Armor Breaker inflicts render on the target, reducing damage absorption by 20% for 10 seconds. Now this is where it really gets good. By increasing that damage that you're going to apply to them by 20%, it is a team boost bonus. This is what you really want to apply in groups. This is where the big bonus from Armor Breaker comes in. And last but not least, Opening Act. Increase Armor Breaker damage by 25% against targets at full health. So obviously a 25% increase against full health enemies is a good thing, but it doesn't stack up too big and too high in numbers. It's a good way to clear out enemies by putting on this armor breaker on them. Remember, you're making them 20% more vulnerable, and then on top of that, you also can do 25% more damage against them. So if the tank is given a chance to hold aggro right in the start and you apply this attack, you can do a massive amount of damage. It also requires the correct sequence of assault from players, so be very careful about it. Mighty Gavel, an overhead leaping attack that crashes down on enemies, dealing 170% weapon damage. Now please follow these abilities very carefully because they do have a lot to do with helping you as a team. Alright, the next one. Increase Mighty Gravel's damage by 20% to targets below 30% health. So that makes it a 200%, a double weapon damage hit to any enemy who is low health. Alright, Impact Fracture. Increase stamina damage done by Mighty Gravel by 25%. So now you're actually breaking the stamina of enemies. This is also going to help you break shields. Breaking another 25% extra damage onto it is going to make it like any heavy attack. You're going to take off a nice chunk of that shield. A nice shield breaker for you is going to give you another damage phase a lot sooner. And last but not least, Expedite. After a successful Mighty Gravel attack, gain haste, increase players' movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds. And at the bottom, Justice for All. Now this is the skill for the entire tree. Pressing light attacks during Mighty Gravels performs a follow-up attack that does 220% weapon damage. So if you Mighty Gravel and you hit a light attack in the middle of the motion, it will have a follow-up for 220% weapon damage. This is massive. So if you're on the last part of the bar, there is a 420% weapon damage. That is your enemy's last 30%. 420% weapon damage is a massive boost. It's 4 times. If you putting on your armor breaks 20% impact with that 420, it's through the roof. The damage you're going to apply is just unbelievable. It makes it a good hit for you. It's a good way for you to get bosses down and to get bosses really big time damage in a short period of time. Wrecking Ball. Strike the ground with your Warhammer, dealing 130% weapon damage and flat. Can't read the words. And flattening your target. So this is going to knock your target down. It's going to do 130% weapon damage. Not really the best, but you'll see there are perks to using Wrecking Ball. Safety measures on successful hit. Gain Fortify, granting 20% damage resistance for 7 seconds. This is good to be applied right next to your tank or onto the boss. This is going to improve your Fortify. It's going to give you that 20% damage resistance. Breathing Room. All targets within 1.5 meters hit are also flattened. So everybody is now going down. This is going to knock them down, push them down, so they're not going to be standing up. It gives you a short reprieve. As you can see, these are team flow attacks. This is also team flow attacks, but it's much more indicated for getting away from enemies. This isn't going to affect your tank too badly. It's not going to pull aggro, and since these aren't taunting abilities, using them in close range to your tank is a good idea because it will increase their flow. Now here is something else. Hardening Steel adds grit to your Warhammer heavy attacks and grants 20% damage reduction while the heavy attack crit is active. So it's another way for you to gain damage reduction. Warhammer Timer. Gain empowered on heavy attacks, increasing attack damage by 20% for 4 seconds. Okay. Since it's empowered, it is a big thing. 20% increase in damage for 4 seconds. If you pile this on with these 3, that'll make a big, as with these 2, sorry, that'll make a big difference to your assault. It is a big thing, but I will just go over it very lightly. Next one, Contemption. Increase heavy attack damage by 15% against targets under 30% health. Okay, it's not that big of a deal. Power through pain, deal 35% extra damage for 1 second after taking damage. So every time you take a hit, you deal a little bit more damage. It's a double-edged sword. If you take too much of damage, you're gonna die very quickly. Okay, in form of bonk. Increase armor penetration by 10% for all Warhammer light and heavy attacks. Okay, so penetration means you're going to take down defense shields quite quickly. This is a good thing for you to have. It goes on light and heavy, so it's a good thing for you to apply. It's going to pull enemies down quickly. Exhaustive attacks. All Warhammer abilities apply exhaust, slowing a target's stamina regeneration by 20% for 5 seconds. Does not stack. So if you use exhaust on a boss, you're gaining a quick reprieve to actually deal a little bit of extra damage. Applying this to enemies who have a stagger break is definitely going to help you big time, because they recover that stamina bar within a certain amount of time. Applying this ability is going to help you massively. Quick recovery. Heavy attacks that hit reduce cooldowns by 7%. As you can see, another ability to cool down yourself. Now, overall, the Warhammer is a very effective tool. It is a tool to apply for an entire team. If you pair up the Warhammer with the right secondary weapon, you can do unbelievable amounts of damage. If you're the close range DPS, using the Warhammer in conjunction with the spear might be one of your best abilities. Using Warhammer and Great Axe also is a good idea. If you're using it in mid, an axe and Warhammer is a good idea. If you're using it to tank, using the Juggernaut is a good idea, but using Crowd Crusher is a better idea for you. It gives you your quick reprieves, plus it has taunt. It is the ability for the tank. Now, I know this isn't the best explanation on a Warhammer, and Warhammer is quite a heavy ability to use. It's also good for people who are playing your higher end defensive positions. That's your, how do I explain it, your healer and your mage. It is a good thing for you to apply as your secondary. It's not really a primary position that you want to use. So that's just about all that I have to say about it. I hope that you all do enjoy, and I will catch you all in the next one. So remember to leave a like and subscribe, and if you do enjoy the content, hit the bell next to the subscribe button.